Welcome to MMAfighting.com's Strikeforce Nashville preview. I'm Ariel Helwani along with Mike Chiappetta, and we're standing outside the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville, Tennessee, where on Saturday night, Strikeforce and CBS will present another edition of CBS Saturday Night Fights. And there are three huge title fights on this card. We'll be breaking down those fights on this very show. And Mike, before we get to the fights, I'm being told this is your first Strikeforce event. Is that true?
This is. I've watched many of them from afar, but this is my first one in person, so I'm looking forward to it.
Which fight are you most looking forward to?
I'm actually most interested in the King Mo fight, just to see how he stacks up against someone who is obviously considered one of the top fighters in the world, in Mousasi. It's a big step up for him in competition, so we're going to see how legitimate he is.
All right, well, let's break this down. First, let's talk about King Mo. Only 6 pro fights on his record. Very brash, very eccentric. He comes out with the elaborate entrances, the dancing and all that. Is he good for the sport? Do you think a guy like that is good for the sport?
I think he's awesome for the sport, to be honest with you. I personally love characters. It makes our job more fun, but even for the fans, I think it's great to have someone like that who always has something to say that's interesting, whether it's something that you disagree with or agree with. He's sort of a lightning rod for attention, and especially for a company like Strikeforce that is still fighting for attention. To have a fighter like that to draw on is great for them, and it's good for the sport too. He doesn't say anything that's too over the top or anything that embarrasses the sport. It's mostly just fun things, and there's nothing wrong with that.
If you look at their respective records, Mousasi has over 20 fights on his record, Mo just 6. Is this a fair matchup?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, in this sport, you really don't know until you put the guys in there. And obviously, every step he's taken, he's done very well at. He was in one of his first fights. He's in there against Travis Few, who's a guy who has 70 fights, and he won that fight easily. So obviously, he's been in there with guys that are good. Mike White had his last fight, easy win for him, a couple minutes. So why not? Why not put him in there? The only argument I think against it would be, why not give him a chance to build his name up more, where this fight might mean a little bit more in the future. But I think it's a good thing for the sport. Why not put your best guys together at the same time? And right now, they're the two best heavyweights that Strikeforce has.
When you talk about King Mo, obviously his wrestling background, Oklahoma State star, we know about how great he is on the ground, but his striking has really improved. Even his submissions have improved. He's training with some of the best submission artists in the game. What kind of an edge do you give him? Because when you talk about Mousasi, we obviously know this guy could and wants to be a pro boxer one day. We know about his striking. We know about his ground game as well. Does he have an edge in anywhere outside of the wrestling department?
I really don't think so, to be honest with you. But the thing about it is that wrestling advantage is so huge that that's going to bring up every other level of his game, because that's always such a threat. When you're that good at one aspect of the game, your opponent always has to be on edge for what's going to come, whether he's going to change levels and that takedown is going to come. So since you're always so wary of that, it's going to make your striking look more crisp, because he's going to be looking here and the punch is going to come here. So I think that's an advantage, the fact that his wrestling is so much better than Mousasi's, and it's going to bring up the rest of his game along with it.
So are you picking the upset here, or are you picking King Mo?
I actually am going to pick King Mo here. I think he's really a great talent, and not that Mousasi isn't. I think Mousasi's awesome. I think he's incredibly talented. I think this is just a situation where you're putting two great fighters together. I think it's going to possibly go the distance. I think that King Mo is going to be able to grind out a win over 5 rounds.
Well, I agree with you. I think King Mo will win. I do not think it will go the distance. I think he'll be able to finish the fight a little earlier. Let's talk about Chinya Aoki against Gilbert Melendez. The Strikeforce lightweight title will be on the line, not the dream title. This is a big deal for both men. I think it's a really big deal for Gilbert. This is a guy who helped put Strikeforce on the map before they were a national promotion. Now here he is fighting on CBS against Aoki. A lot of people, despite the fact that he is considered an underdog, are picking him in this fight. Are you?
Well, I think actually, I looked at the lines, and actually Melendez is favored in the fight.
Oh, he is. I don't know anything about gambling. I thought
I thought that Aoki would be considered the favorite, but Melendez is actually considered the favorite in this fight. I had a chance to talk to him yesterday, as I'm sure you did, and he really feels like this is his coming out party. As you said, he's been with the company since the very beginning, and now he's getting a chance to have a big time fight on network television. A lot of people don't really know who he is, even though he's been around for a long time. So I think he really feels like everything is coming together for him at the same time, and now it's a chance to show the world.
Considering what happened last weekend in Abu Dhabi with BJ Penn losing to Frankie Edgar, is it safe to assume that the winner of this fight could be considered the top lightweight in the world?
Well, I think Aoki would have a much better case than Gilbert would. I think most people consider Gilbert to be around the top 10 or so. Where exactly you place him is, depending on your own taste. Him and I talked about this yesterday. He was saying that it really kind of upsets him that he's not considered higher. He thinks that a lot of the fighters that are outside of the UFC have a hard time getting respect. So that's why he's very happy about this fight, because he knows that Aoki does have that big reputation. So to beat him means a lot more than to beat somebody else in Strikeforce, and so he's really going to be coming out full bore here to get a win.
All right, so we've already established that Aoki is the underdog. If you're in his corner, what are you telling him to do on Saturday night to pull off the upset?
Well, obviously the biggest thing, the main thing, is for him to stay upright. Aoki's just incredible on the ground. As we've seen, he'll do anything to get to the fight to the ground. He's not afraid to pull guard if he needs to. So that, and create scrambles if he needs to. So Gilbert has to be disciplined, and for him, he's called El Nino for a reason. He likes to create chaos. That probably is not going to be the best ideal in this fight, because I think Aoki can find a way to get to the ground if things become a little too crazy. So I think Gilbert needs to be really way more disciplined than he normally is. Just keep away from that takedown, and the fight could be his to win.
All right, finally, let's talk about the main event. Jake Shields, Dan Henderson, middleweight title on the line. Big fight for Dan Henderson, making his Strikeforce and CBS debut. Jake Shields is Mr. CBS. This is his first time on broadcast television, and still doesn't really get the respect that he deserves. He's coming into this fight as the underdog. Who do you like?
I'm actually picking Jake Shields to win. I picked him by 4th round submission. We've heard a couple whispers about Dan Henderson possibly being injured. Nothing I can totally substantiate, but heard it from enough people to think that there could be something to it. And against Jake Shields, that's a tough guy to fight when you're not 100%, because he's just going to keep grinding and grinding. He's going to just keep looking for the takedowns, and we know that he does not get discouraged. If he doesn't get that first takedown, he's going to keep coming. And while Henderson has a pretty substantial advantage, at least with the power part of the striking, Shields' striking is good enough to just stay competitive until he gets the fight to the ground. And if he does get to the fight to the ground, then it's a whole different story there.
The pound-for-pound debate is such a silly one. I know, trust me, from experience. Yeah. But if Jake Shields wins on Saturday night, he's got to be included in the top 10, right?
I think he's got to be very close there, because a lot of people have Henderson in the pound-for-pound debate, being a 185 and 205 champ. Shields has fought as low as 170, within the last couple of years. So he's really, Henderson's fought at 205, Shields fought at 170. They're really bridging the gap here. So if he does beat someone who's so experienced, so seasoned, and been so successful over time as Henderson has been, there's no way you could deny that Jake Shields probably deserves to be in that top 10.
How big of a blow would it be for this organization if Jake Shields wins on Saturday night, considering bringing in Dan Henderson here, all the hoopla, and Jake Shields is a free agent, and Dana White has made it very clear that he's a big fan of his?
Well, I'm a look on the bright side kind of guy, but that's going to be a tough one. If he does indeed become a free agent, I think there's a little bit of gray area there. I think we're not really 100% sure if he's going to be a free agent or if there's a title clause invoked where he has to defend the title at least once. But that's going to be very tough for Strikeforce. If he wins the fight, Henderson loses, and they lose Shields on top of it. I'm sure if Jake wins, they're really going to make a concerted effort to keep Jake Shields in the fold, because let's face it, a win over Dan Henderson is a huge thing, and it's going to really vault him a level or two as far as his stardom.
All right, final question, and I want to see if you agree with me here, because in talking to a lot of the fighters yesterday, I got the sense that after what transpired in Abu Dhabi with the fights, some of them not delivering, especially the top 3, that some of the fighters here are saying, you know what, we're going to show the people what Strikeforce MMA is all about. Are you sensing them sort of rallying around each other to sort of make this non-verbal commitment to finishing the fights and putting on exciting fights tomorrow night?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily an organizational thing. I think it's a personal pride thing, and all these guys pride themselves on being finishers and being stars and being putting on electric performances that people are going to talk about. Even a guy like Jake Shields, who for a long time had sort of a reputation as, a boring fighter, as a lay and pray fighter. But if you look at his record, I think he's finished like 6 of his last 7 fights by submission. So you really can't knock that. And the rest of the guys as well. You look at the records, these guys are knockout guys, they're submission guys, they're guys that finish. And I think to them it's just a personal pride thing of being able to finish, putting on a show, and letting the fans know exactly where they stand.
And by the way, you're picking Tim Stout over Mayhem Miller, right? That's what you told me off camera.
No, live underdog. I honestly, I think like a lot of people, I don't know a whole lot about Tim Stout. There's not a whole lot. He hasn't been on television a lot. His record is a little bit underwhelming, but they're both taking the fight on short notice, so you never know.
All right, you do never know. One thing we do know: Saturday night fights on CBS, a great lineup of fights. 3 title fights on the card: King Mo Musasi, Aoki Melendez, and of course Shields Henderson. It should be a great night of fights, and of course it's free on broadcast television. You cannot beat that. For Mike Chiappetta, I am Ariel Helwani, and of course don't forget, for all your MMA Strikeforce needs, check out MMAfighting.com.